What I say is that there's a lot of things that all you really have to do is do the first 80%. The world doesn't require 100%, it just requires something. Okay, so it might be the first 80%. And then there's some activities, and we see a lot of them in modern life. Virtually every manufacturing process requires successive 80%. So you have to go from 80% to 96%, and then another 80%, you have to go to 99.2%. And then there's a concept called Six Sigma, which is actually 680%. So if anyone you ever heard that and want to know what it is, it's actually just taking the process and to 680%. Chip design, it might be 8 or 9 or 10 80%. Surgery teams have a lot of 80%. The whole process for making sure an airliner takes off safely and lands safely. United States, before the San Francisco crash, there was 40 million flights with no fatality. So the airline industry has got this down really, really good, the 80% it requires.
Our next presenter has provided you with some goodies, one of them including the 80% approach, which I believe he's going to talk about. He's one of my closest friends. I've learned more about business and thinking about life and living life from Dan Sullivan than probably anyone. I've been in his program, Strategic Coach, for over 13 years. I highly recommend, if you are not in Strategic Coach, that you join Strategic Coach. I'm their highest referrer because I think it's an amazing organization, not only from what you'll get out of it, but just seeing a company that literally walks the walk and talks the talk as good as I've ever seen. How many of you in the room are in Strategic Coach right now? Okay, so you already know how big of a genius Dan is. And so Dan has coached more successful entrepreneurs at a certain income level than anyone else in the world. I've always said that he's the smartest entrepreneurial thinker of anyone that I know. I consider him a genius, and I believe the insights he's going to share with you today, if you take them seriously, will dramatically simplify your life, will probably give you an opportunity to make a lot more money, and will probably make you just a much more confident, grateful human being. So give it up for Dan Sullivan. Thank you. Thank you.
They were punking you before, don't you know that? There was nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong.
Is that true?
Yeah, they were just punking you. The punker gets punked. Anyway, well, my name is Dan, and I'm ADD. And it's important for me to tell you that because everything I'm going to show you this afternoon, everything we're going to go through, and everything, in fact, that's in Strategic Coach was created because I need it. And the reason is because every day I get thrown off balance and I get bogged down, and just like everyone that Ned Hallowell talked about. And so what I'm going to take you through is a thought process. And this is really a distillation of almost 40 years now, working personally with about 6,000 very ambitious, very talented, very successful entrepreneurs who share this common characteristic that they've got way too much going on, don't know what to do with the busyness, and they just have a very, very difficult relationship with themselves. And so the thing I'm going to talk to you about is what it is that you need as a toolkit. And the other thing I'd like to say about this sheet of paper, this is the essence of how I live every one of my days. So everything, this map that I've put together is actually when I get out of bed in the morning and how I operate and how I go through the day. And I just like to share it with you because I've learned a lot and I've shared it with a lot of people, and it seems to strike home with a lot of people that I work with. And what I've discovered is that if you can stay personally in a state that has 4 emotions to it, you have a high level of morale, you have a tremendous sense of momentum, there's a very, very high level of motivation, and you have a sense that you're creating multipliers, you're a very happy entrepreneur. Okay? And so what I strive to is to show individuals how they can just get themselves into a daily state that goes forward perpetually, and that allows them to create a very exciting organization around them, and allows them to do incredible work out in the world, and it just allows them to be very valuable individuals who at the end of their life have a tremendous sense of success, satisfaction, and significance. Now it all comes down to how you measure. So what I've discovered is that all happiness comes down to a single factor, and that's measurement. And that is that when you achieve something, how do you measure it? So on this little map in the upper left-hand corner, I have an either-or. And what I want to show you is one way of measuring, and that is that you visualize, everybody starts, and they have a picture of something they'd like to achieve. And I call that the ideal. You have an ideal, and you visualize yourself in the ideal. And that ideal is not a goal. That ideal shines light on what could be your goals. And you have very specific goals you go towards, and you make progress towards it, and you achieve it. And then you measure what it is that you've accomplished. And if you measure your goal against the ideal, it's like you haven't done anything. You're right back to square one. It's like the horizon line. No matter how you go towards the horizon line, you can't get it. That's a mechanism that we have to make sense of time, or make sense of space. But what the ideal is our way of making sense with time, and it serves the same purpose as the horizon line, and we can't get there. But if you measure always your achievement and progress against the ideal, you always feel a tremendous sense of loss, that I feel that you're always in the gap, and it puts you in something that I call the negative zone. Okay? And some people, literally high achievers, role models for everybody else, live their entire life in the negative zone, simply because they're always measuring their progress and their achievement against the ideal. Okay, they can't win. It's a game that they just can't possibly win. The other way of doing it, it looks almost exactly the same, is that you visualize, you get a picture, because that's what the ideal does. It shines light on what the immediate actions are that you can take, and the achievements that you can have, and you move towards them, you make progress, and you have the achievement. And then you measure, but you measure backwards from where you started, and it always feels good. No matter how much progress you had, it always feels good. And what I've discovered is kind of binary, that human beings will either be 1 or 0 on this. They measure against the ideal, or they measure against the start. And it's like a switch in your brain, and it's either on the ideal side or it's on the start side. And if you do this for your whole life, then it becomes habitual. So what happens then with this is that the negative zone, if you measure, then you have a set of experiences which reinforce each other: failure, frustration, disappointment, low self-esteem, guilt, and a sense of depression about it. And these things are a downward cycle that tend to reinforce each other. And one of the things that people resort to is various kinds of addictions to give themselves a sense of momentary success that they would have had if they had actually achieved the ideal. These can be very powerful, various kinds of addictions. And what happens is that they do get the feeling, but it's self-destructive, and the cost of it keeps getting greater. The other one is the positive zone, and by always measuring backwards, what you do is you get a sense of success, you get a sense of satisfaction, all the ones: confidence, high self-esteem, enjoyment, and there's a tremendous sense of optimism. And it all has to do with which position the switch is on in your brain. So the question is, can you train yourself to move the switch over to how many of you would, would actually choose the positive zone to the negative zone just based on what I've said? Okay, but that's important because some people actually like the addictiveness that goes along with the left-hand side, and of course they may be heavily addicted and they just can't get out of it. I mean, they may have literally, and Ned Hallowell, we've talked about this for hours and hours and hours, is that they may literally have changed their brain circuitry and their chemistry in such a way that it's very, very difficult for them to get out of it. But I'm talking with people who have a real desire. They're successful people, very ambitious people, very talented people. So what I started to do personally, and as I said, I'm a self-tester. I'm a lot like Tim Ferriss. Everything gets tested on me, okay? I stop short of sticking needles in my legs and everything like that, but I'm a self-tester, and if it doesn't work for me, no one else hears about it. But the one thing I started 15 years ago was every night when I looked at my day, I accounted for the entire day with 3 wins, okay? Just 3 wins, okay? So no matter what happened that day, it could have been a bad day, it could have been a good day, I would find 3 wins, and the 3 wins represented the day. And then before I went to bed, I would look at the next day, and I would say, well, what are the 3 wins going to be tomorrow that are even better than the 3 wins I had today? And I've done this every single night for 15 years. And so I literally have this sense that I'm always winning. Okay, and because you do it so often, I'm a great believer in habit, that your brain just starts looking for things that you can count as wins. When I walk through today, when I look at today's workshop, all I'm looking for is what are the wins today. Okay, that's all I'm looking for. I don't care what bad happens. I don't care what doesn't go right or anything else. I'm just looking for the wins. So in the workshop, we started doing this where it's just a paper form. It takes about 5-10 minutes. People, write down their 3 wins, and they talk about the 3 wins for tomorrow, and then they share with each other. And it was a real hit, and people started taking it home and teaching their children how to do this. They started changing their family life so that they were having dinner in the evening, and everybody in the evening sitting around the children. And children take to this really quick. They really like it, especially it's that connection thing that Ned was talking about. One thing to connect, but if you're connecting about your wins, it's even more powerful.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
So we were having a lot of success with this, but it's on a piece of paper. Some people do it, some people don't do it. And I said, I'd like to get this to be more widely spread for the entrepreneurs in the program. And so what I did is I talked to my project manager, and we were in January, so I'm just going to tell you what we found out, about this. Okay. So this is Kathy Davis, and she's...
I think that this is such a really exciting and big opportunity for Strategic Coach. For probably just over a year now, lots of people have been asking us to create an app, and there's just never been the right feeling one. Until one day in January, Dan and I were sitting in the workshop room, and he has been talking about this concept of 3 wins. So getting focused on the 3 wins that you had today and what 3 wins that you want to set yourself up for tomorrow. And it was like the heavens opened, and that was absolutely the right direction we felt we wanted to go with this app. So, I'm really, really happy to say that Strategic Coach, as of the end of June, has launched Win Streak, which is an app to do just that. It tracks the progress that you've made today and allows you to predict what things that you want to have happen tomorrow. So it just gives you a clear sense of the really great things that you can have happening. And we've made sure that this app is really simple to use. We want anybody and everybody to be able to have the opportunity to get themselves on a win streak. So the app is very simple, it's clean, it's clear, and we just want everyone to take charge and start a new habit and get on a win streak.
So that's Kathy. Now, in the book, I have a book up here which is called The 80% Approach, and this is going to be the rest of my presentation, but there's a bookmark, and at the bottom there's a QR code, and you can just put your iPhone on it and you get the app. It automatically downloads the app. You can give this to anyone. It's a free app, and you can send it to anyone. So one of the things is, I figure 7 billion people on the planet, if we all had them on a win streak, it would probably produce a lot of good. Anyway, so, anyway, but it's a very simple concept, but what it does is that it solves the big problem of morale. So if you're always on a winning streak, that you have very, very high morale, and high morale makes a lot of things possible. Personally, it makes a lot of things possibly from an organizational standpoint, and that's really what I want to do is that, I want your life as an entrepreneur to really be happy. I want you to seem happy, and I want your example to spread happiness through your family and through your company. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is that, so that's kind of one form of what I would call perfectionism, which is the measuring yourself against the ideal. All perfectionism comes from measuring against the ideal. So I'm going to bring Kathy back a little later, and we're going to have a little go-between on how we create things, because the next part of it is that one of the greatest frustrations about entrepreneurs, especially ADD entrepreneurs, there are some, Ned, that aren't, I want to tell you, and their experience of being in strategic coach is like a visit to the zoo, so that, I've created a structure that actually protects the normal people from the animals. Anyway, so anyway, and that would include me, So one of the things I've noticed, because I've always worked in, like I was a copywriter with BBDO when I started, and I've always worked in activities, theater, I was in theater, and other activities where there's a lot of deadlines, and I've written a lot. I've written 13 books, and my other writing's probably the equivalent of another 40 or 50 books, and I have to produce a brand new workshop every 90 days, and I've done that every quarter for 25 years, a brand new full workshop for my clients, and I like deadlines. But the problem is the procrastination one. So perfectionism is the one thing that causes extreme unhappiness. The other one is the procrastination that goes along with perfectionism. So what I began to realize that actually just getting something started is the most important thing that you have to do with a project. And I came up with this diagram, which is called 80%, that basically the first move that you make is the 80% most important move that you could make. It's the just getting something started and in action that actually gets everything else moving. And so my role as the entrepreneur is just to do the first 80% and then have that 80% use up a very, very short period of time. So I'm a great starter. Just let's do a survey in the room. How many of the rest of you are starters rather than finishers? Starters rather than finishers. Yeah, and it's a common trait, and a lot of frustration comes because of that. So what I say is that there's a lot of things that all you really have to do is do the first 80%. The world doesn't require 100%, it just requires something. Okay, so it might be the first 80%. And then there's some activities, and we see a lot of them in modern life. Virtually every manufacturing process requires successive 80%. So you have to go from 80% to 96%, and then another 80%, you have to go to 99.2%. And then there's a concept called Six Sigma, which is actually 680%. So if anyone you ever heard that and want to know what it is, it's actually just taking the process and to 680%. Chip design, it might be 8 or 9 or 10 80%. Surgery teams have a lot of 80%. The whole process for making sure an airliner takes off safely and lands safely. United States, before the San Francisco crash, there was 40 million flights with no fatality. So the airline industry has got this down really, really good, the 80% it requires. I mean, their marketing, they could work on their, they could work on their marketing a little bit, because right now their marketing strategy is we're not happy until you're not happy, but but I think on making sure that you take off safely and land safely, I think that they've done a phenomenal job. Okay, so I take this that basically when I come up with an idea, all I have to do is get something started, because I'm not going to be the one probably who's going to do the other 80%. So relating this back to the gap, that if you are going for perfection, then you're starting with a concept of 100%. Right off the bat, you're holding yourself for 100% responsibility. This happens an awful lot with book writing. The author says it's going to be me, and I have to do 100% of the writing, and right off the bat, you've condemned yourself to a 50% loss of energy in just conceiving the book, because you've already taken away the possibility of high morale. It immediately puts you in a hole. And the thing about this is that when you set yourself personally for 100%, which is perfection, there's very low teamwork with other people. There's people who could help you, but your very attitude cuts you off from the possibility of teamwork. And if there's low teamwork, there's also low innovation. You don't get access to other people's ideas and skills. And the third one is that there's low breakthroughs. If you have low teamwork and you have low innovation, then there's going to be low breakthroughs. And so then that simply reinforces and probably sets you up for the failure syndrome that we were talking about previously, and people go deeper into the negative zone. On the other hand, if we take the other approach, and it's the 80%, then what happens is that all you're saying is that I'm just responsible for one of the 80%, and other people with other skill and other tools are going to be responsible for the next 80%. And the bedrock concept that holds strategic coach together is called unique ability, and that is there's something you do extraordinarily well, and if we can get you to stay within the circle of what you do extraordinarily well, and then outside that circle is everybody else's skills, then you can get an enormous amount done in the world. And the neat thing about this is that all of modern technology is really supporting this position of bringing as many skills as possible together very, very quickly, so that there is a great possibility of teamwork and innovation and breakthroughs that comes out of this. Okay, so I just consider in my company that I'm just kind of a starter, okay? And I do have some other skills, like I'm a good writer and I'm a good artist, but, I'm pulled in as sort of a craftsman at certain parts of the project, but I'm not in control of those projects. So here are my key principles on this. Number one, get the fastest first step. That's my goal with anything. The moment I get the idea, what's the fastest first step? And I'm actually going to show you a thought process that I use, which is called the impact filter. And I do about 3 or 4 of these a day. I've trained my brain just to think in this way. The next one is get different abilities involved as fast as you possibly can. Don't hold on to a project. Just get it started, get everybody clear about what the project is, and then get everybody else involved. Next one is each time you bring another person in, each 80% step introduces new energy into the process. Okay, so you have a lot of momentum. Next one is teamwork equals innovation equals breakthroughs. That's, a lot of you have become very successful entrepreneurs, but you've mostly done it on talent. And talent runs out of gas at a certain point. Talent hits a wall at some point, and that, of course, the frustration of a lot of, highly ambitious entrepreneurs is that they're still relying on talent, and at a certain point, you got to switch to stage 2, is talent times teamwork. That's the next one. And then the next one is 80% is more useful than 100%. So if I take an 80% approach, I'm probably going to get 10 times more done than if I take a 100% approach. Okay, and I'm going to be a lot happier. I'm going to have high morale. There's going to be enormous momentum around me within my organization. I'm going to be highly motivated about bigger and better things because I've got a formula for getting things done, getting a lot of other people involved in it. And then the other thing is that I can go 10 times. So one of the other guiding principles is that to be a happy entrepreneur, you should always be working on something where you're going 10 times. You know, it could be 10 times revenues, 10 times profits. What Tim was talking about, you can pull a lot of things together. You can double your free time. Okay, you double your free time, you increase your personal income by 5 times. You know, there's a lot of different variations you can do on 10 times. Okay, so that's the whole point. But that combination of you operating within your unique ability and having yourself and the entire company motivated by 10 times. Now, people say, well, why not 100 times? And I say, well, do the first 10 times and then do it again. I say 100 times, immediately you're putting yourself in the gap. Just do 10 times. 10 times is okay. If you do it once, then you're better at it, so do it again. Then you're at 100 times, you know. So the whole thing is not to play a game you can win, because I just noticed a lot of entrepreneurs just set up the game right from the start. They can't win the game, you know. And, you know, I don't know if you believe in the afterlife or not, but you don't have to go to hell if your whole life has been lived out of setting up games that you can't win. You probably worked off all the afterlife punishment. I was growing Catholic. I'm an expert on this. Jews invented guilt, but Catholics perfected it. Okay, so in my company, and this is where I'm telling you how I operate. So what I'm going to show you is on a daily basis, if you did a snapshot and you, the reporter who can't follow Tim around is following me around, they would notice that I'm doing a lot of thinking and putting it in thinking processes to figure out whether I want these ideas to actually go on and become action, and if they do, how I pass them on. So this is me, and I call this the first 80%. So this is you, actually. So up here I'm talking about you. And with you, you have a goal, okay? And you see it real big. So out of today's activities, tomorrow's activities, there's going to be some big goals that emerge, okay? And so what I do, the moment that I have that goal, I use a tool called the impact filter, and you have copies, all of you have it right on your tables. If you just pass out the white printed sheet, they're down here, right here, so it's a sheet that looks like this. Okay? So this is a thought process. This is the paper version, and we have a software version for the participants in Strategic Coach. So you can do it, and you can save all your impact filters. And I'll take you through it in just a few minutes. But what I do is an impact filter, and then I pass it to one of my project managers. Okay, so Paul Hamilton, this is Paul Hamilton. Paul Hamilton is one of my project managers. So just a very, very short one, and I could do an entire talk on this. One of the biggest failures that I've seen among entrepreneurs is they make a mistake between what I call process managers and project managers. And they hire a lot of people, and then they don't know why their people aren't excited by all their new ideas. And the reason is because the people they've hired are not project managers, okay? They've hired process managers, and what process managers like to do is to do the same thing every day and keep getting better at it. They do not like new things, okay? Project managers only like new things, and they want to take it right through to completion, but they don't want to do it a second time. So I'm only surrounded on a daily basis with people who like taking my ideas, running with them, getting them finished, and then handing them over to other people, and then they come back and they say, what's the next one? So they're as close to a pure entrepreneur that you can get in a team situation that isn't actually the entrepreneur. So I have to be surrounded. I would suspect almost everybody in this room is that you have to be surrounded by project managers and not process managers. you drive process managers crazy and they drive you crazy. And so that's not a good thing. Okay, so Peter, I'm working with Peter right now, but the key player here is Marissa. Marissa's right there because Marissa is a project manager. Marissa loves getting Peter's new ideas completed and in play, but she doesn't want to do them a second time.
She does a great job.
Yeah, she does. She doesn't want to do it a second time. So if you want to talk about process manager over the next 2 days, just talk to Paul. But I'm going to go back to Kathy Davis because Kathy is the project manager that I work most. So what I do is I do a impact filter. It takes me about a half hour to do this. I'm really good at it. And I've done close to 1,000 of them. And I just, it's a way of satisfying whether, one, I'm sold on the idea, one, it's an idea that should actually go into action, and number 3 is if it does go into action, then I'm going to give very clear instructions to the person who's going to then take it. So I send it to Kathy, and the reason is because my role in the company is to make things up. Okay? I'm a master of making things up. I could make anything up. Okay? But my company should not be subjected to my making it up habits. Okay? So I would say if I've achieved it 10 times over the last 10 years, it's a 1/10 of the ideas that I think about get communicated to my company because I just come back and confuse them. Okay, here he comes again, shields up. Shields up. Oh, no, and where does this one belong, Dan, with the 25 you've already given me? Okay, and you drive people crazy and it undermines their confidence. Okay, so here's Kathy again. So Kathy's going to talk through what happens when she gets my impact filter.
Getting an impact filter from Dan is really important and crucial at the beginning of any project, and specifically for this app project because, first of all, I know he's extraordinarily sold on the idea. This is something he really wants to see have happen. So I know right out of the gate that this is something that he's got a lot of intention around. And the second thing that's really important is that he's just extraordinarily clear about what the result is that he's looking to get from this. So when I get the impact filter and he's illustrated his criteria for me, he's not telling me how to get it done, he's telling me what he wants the result to look like when it is done, and leaves that strategizing up to me. And I think that it's just such an extraordinary clear way to communicate to people what your intentions are. And I think the one thing that Dan has done that ended up being a really good byproduct is that he gives me a little bit of time to marinate in the impact filter. So he doesn't hand it to me and we don't sit down right away and have a conversation about it. He gives me time to take it away, read it, think about it, and start to come up with some strategies, solutions, maybe some ulterior plans that will make the project happen a little bit smoother that he maybe didn't think about on the onset. But it gives me a chance to do that with myself. Last thing I want to do is rain on Dan's parade in terms of this new project because I know how excited he is about it. So this just gives me the chance to do all my strategic thinking and then come back because I'm also excited about this project and all of the projects that Dan comes to me with, and I want to make sure that he knows how excited I am. So it just gives me a real clear opportunity to think through that. So I think that's just a real pivotal thing to do.
So the impact filter that I sent Kathy is the first one. So you'll see Dan's impact filter, and you can read that through tonight. So she gets that. And what I'm doing is that I'm not telling Kathy how to do the project. I'm just telling Kathy what the project looks like when it's finished. This is the importance of it, and this is the impact we're going to have. So the project that we're actually going to talk about here is actually the creation of the app that we just talked about. Kathy came out and introduced the app, and I'm going to tell you how the teamwork was that did that. It was about a 5-month teamwork. And so she's going to explain it because Kathy is the second 80%, and she's the project manager. If you're going to hire someone and you're thinking about hiring anyone in your company, I would strongly recommend that you hire a project manager before you hire anyone else. And the reason is that Kathy is a master of 2 tools of doing impact filters to launch a project, and she also has one called a strategy circle, which we'll explain in just a few minutes. And the reason is Kathy is the master of making things real. I'm not a master of making things real, I'm a master of making things up. So when I come to the line that finishes making things up, I have to pass it on to a skilled person who's passion. Now, Kathy is a master of making things up, but only within my projects. She doesn't start her own projects, okay? And it's a particular profile, which Paul, Shannon especially, Shannon, raise your hand. Shannon's speaking tomorrow morning on teamwork, but she'll talk to you about that. So then Kathy goes into action, and she's going to explain what it takes to make it real. Okay, so this is...
I think the most important thing I do right out of the gate is I do my own impact filter. Essentially, I do an impact filter on Dan's impact filter. So I have a real clear sense of what his vision is, and then I do an impact filter on how I'm going to actually make that real. So I start to think through the strategies. So my success criteria start to become strategies and ideas that I know need to happen in order to make his vision a reality. So it's just a great chance for me to get clear on that. I communicate that back to Dan, so he knows that I'm clear about what needs to happen in order to have his vision become a reality. So he now has confidence in me that I'm going to get the job done. And then I can turn around, take that impact filter, drop it into a strategy circle, which for me is the best tool to think through all of the things that need to get done and really build a team around what needs to happen and start to come up with the explicit strategies in order to have it happen. I knew that by doing the strategy circle, there were going to be a number of things that were going to be needed for this particular project. So one was definitely the development of this particular app. We have an amazing tech and development team in-house at Strategic Coach, but based on the timeline that Dan and I had discussed up front, and all of the other projects that we have going on in the company, this ended up being a really good project that we could actually outsource with. Since it was its own independent little entity that could, be created by someone else, especially someone else that had experience in creating apps, since that's something that we had never done before. So by doing the impact filter and the strategy circle, we were really clear that this was the correct direction to go in.
So then Kathy puts together the third 80%, which is the team, and that's whoever she needs to actually carry it out, and in this case, it involved an outside organization. Now, what I should say is that we wanted the app back by June 30th. We had it on June 24th. But the thing was that between the time we got agreement on the impact filter, so it took me a half hour to write the impact filter, her impact filter came back to me. So we had two documents. We had these two documents, and she lives 1,000 miles away from me. So I live in Toronto, and she lives in Winnipeg. So we see each other perhaps, maybe 2 months of the year actually live, but this was all done by email, and it was done by Skype, and it was done by teleconference. But this document is actually just a teamwork document, and we just talked about it. We talked about it for a half hour, and then she was off and running. So between that conversation and the actual finished impact filter, an hour of my time was required over the next 5 months. I was only involved she made the decision on the outside developer. She went through the design process and everything else. And the reason is I know nothing about apps, so what input am I going to have? The only time I was brought back in is that we were going to call it the 3 wins, and it was taken. And she came back to me, and I'm good at naming things, so I said, well, what do we want here? And I said, well, what we want is a winning streak, but winning streak was too long for an app, so they made it win streak, and I think win streak's turned out to be a better name. And that was an hour, I just played around with an hour. We went back and forth. And so there were literally hundreds and hundreds of hours on this project. There were roughly about, all told, about 10 other people involved, but I knew nothing about that. The only thing I knew is that on June 24th, we got a result, and it more than satisfied the criteria I'd put together in the original. And that's a big win, so that constitutes a big win. And Kathy and I have done probably 100 projects like this over the last 6 years, okay? And each of them is just a little upfront with me, very clear instructions. And so what it does for me is that allows me, so what it is then that you need a team to make it recur, and one of the teams that we need to make it recur was Apple. So Apple is out there, Apple is part of our team. We have the developers who are constantly fine-tuning it, so they're part of our team. So in this world, your team can be anywhere. Okay, and that's what I love, is that this is a methodology fits in perfectly with the technologies that we now have for communication and collaboration, because you're just doing a part of it and you're not overseeing the complexity of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is wrap this up, because now this is the way I'm going to operate for the rest of my life. Okay, so I've got a methodology, and I put together a new 25-year framework for where I'm going to go, and it takes me over 90. And so my goal is at 90, I'm just as energetic, just as involved, just as enthusiastic as I am today. And the way I'm going to do that is by vastly simplifying my existence right now, such a way that I just do the first 80%, okay? And my entire life from now on is just making it up, okay? And that's leadership, okay? And so I'm just in a leadership role, okay? And that's me, and I suspect that's all you are. And then I have a line, I call it the line, and I don't go any further than the line. And on the other side of the line, I'm just creating a framework by the impact filter where I explain to everybody exactly what the purpose is, okay? Exactly what the purpose is, why we doing this. The next thing is the importance of it if we pull it off. The other thing is the ideal outcome, what it looks like, what the benefit would be. And then the other thing is, I always say what the worst result is, and you can see the worst results there. We totally screw it up. It's a mess. We give it to the clients. It doesn't work. Our renewals drop by 30%. We start laying off staff. I'm miserable. No, I really spell it out. I scare the shit out of myself. And it's very, very important. One of the most famous actors of all time, Laurence Olivier, he would, before he went to act every night, and he was renowned for, if he was doing something for the 150th time, that he would go, and just before the performance, they had peepholes in the curtains, and he would look out, and he would remind himself that if he tried to do last night's performance, he was going to totally blow it. So he would say, "This is not last night's audience. This is not last night's theater. This is not last night's performance. This is not last night." And he would just remind himself that it was all fresh and new, and he'd scared himself right back to opening night. And so every play was opening night, and he was as scared as can be. So whenever I do anything, I want to make sure I get myself in a state of creative fear, that I'm going to blow it, okay? And then I say, okay, I've handled the fear, and then I say, okay, so what's the best result? Now I want the excitement, because all achievement is a high-octane mixture between fear and excitement. A lot of people kind of try to remove both from their life, and they produce nothing. You cannot get away from fear and excitement, but it's got to be fear and excitement for the right things. So I'm laying out something really right, and then I lay out the success criteria. So my philosophy is, and this relates back to the very first model I started with about this gap of measuring your progress. You're measuring your progress against the ideal. If you just stay on your side of the line, you've probably reduced by 99% that you'll actually do this. So in order to stay out of the gap, you've got to stay on your side of the line. So my whole philosophy for the rest of my life is just stay on my side of the line and do impact filters, surround myself with great project managers who create great teamwork. And all I have to do is relate to about 5 or 6 project managers, and they create extensive teamwork, and I don't have to know anything about that. There was an additional expense on this project that wasn't budgeted, and I never knew anything about it, because why would you talk to Dan about budget? I get $500 in my ATM every 2 weeks, and I'm as happy as can be, that's it. I lead a very, very simple life. I do about 3 activities, and that's it. And this is what I teach, because the ADD person shouldn't be involved in a lot of activities. The ADD person should just be involved in 2 or 3 incredibly important, powerful, multiplying activities, and then have a whole teamwork structure that actually allows you to multiply yourself out in the world. And so this is it. This is the thing. So what I'd like you to think about is, where is your line, and if you could make great progress every 90 days of staying more and more on your side of the line, and then having this great project management team on the other side of the line who actually do know how to find the talent, they know how to train people, they know how to set up the entire completion schedule, and then they know how to hand it off to other people. Your life is just going to be incredibly happy. And then it's just making sure you take your drugs every day. Thank you. Thank you. Which I do, by the way. I'm very good at my drugs. Yeah, so, Joe, are we here?
I'm right here.
Do you want
So,
any Q&A?
I was going to just wait for a few minutes, just kind of let you wander around and just kind of figure out what the
I'll
hell's
just start
going on.
unbuttoning my shirt there.
We're going to do some Q&A.
I can have Renee go out. I'll unbutton some. She had a day on you.
Yeah.
Oh, the thing I wanted to tell you on the other side of the sheet, and this is the strategy circle, and I've had this process for since 1982, and this is just a way of understanding that all creativity consists of 4 things. We call it VODA, that you have a vision, and then your mind immediately comes up with the opposition to your vision. And what you do is you take each obstacle and you flip it creatively into a strategy and an action, and you can take on any kind of challenge in the world if you will treat the opposition as raw material. And you can't treat the opposition as raw material unless you have a big vision. So this is how I made my whole living for 30 years, and so all of our teamwork projects go into this form. But Kathy laid this out, so you can really study this because you can see the go back and forth between Kathy and me, and then what Kathy did to set up the teamwork and how she followed through and created the entire project. Okay, and I never saw this until I was getting ready for the presentation here. I never saw her strategy circle. So anyway.
Yeah, it's great. Ethan, we'll start with Ethan, and then we'll go this way.
Well, Dan, first of all, thank you for your work. And those frameworks were very helpful and very simple, something we kind of put into play. The question I had is, as you were mentioning, sometimes when I go off to events like this, my team is waiting for me to come back and kind of brace yourself because there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff coming through. Do you have a strategy as to how you help your team? Because we might get it and comprehend it as to how we're going to go working forward, and we kind of explain it to them. But do you have any ways that you've seen that work best to help your team kind of comprehend, understand it? Do you provide any trainings or any type of recommendations to help them get on board?
Well, just me personally, so I'm going to differentiate between me personally. My teaching form is the impact filter. Okay, so it's my single communication vehicle about anything. But you see, I'm going to come back with a lot of ideas here, and not all of them are discussable. They're thinkable, but they're not discussable. And there's only 3 or 4 of them that are actionable out of here during the next, before we get back to 25K again. So, Joe's events are akin to drinking out of a fire hydrant. And so you've got to have filters that figure, okay, there's certain things I like to think about, but then I have to make a decision, do I want to talk to anyone else about this? Okay? So what I'm showing you is that the role that you see on the left-hand sheet there, that's my role. And that's my entire vehicle for communication with my team. Okay? And I only communicate with about 5 or 6 people inside of a company. We have 100 employees. And, I have roles, and everybody knows there's roles. When we have a coaching workshop or something, there's a procedure, but it's like a scripted theater, and everybody knows their role. But when we're creating new stuff, this is all new, goes through this thinking process. So that's it. But the other thing is that we, in Coach, in addition to coaching the entrepreneurs, we also coach their teams. So Shannon Waller is going to talk about this tomorrow morning. And Shannon is the master of how you train your teams to support this type of entrepreneur. But both sides have to play by the rules.
Okay, great. So there's an opportunity for our teams to actually come and get trained on this.
Yeah,
as well.
or Shannon in some cases. I know Dr. Hotze had, Shannon came down. Dr. Hotze heard my interview in Success Magazine. Monica, where's Monica? Are they gone or are they not here? Anyway, they listened to it and they immediately signed up for me to coach, and it was about 5 months before they could actually come, and they immediately got their Shannon involved. I mean, write me a check and all sorts of things are available to you.
Tell me where to send it.
I mean, there's something that triggers this process. It's actually very simple. It's
cash. Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate
you don't want it to be complex. It's just one thing. Yeah. But again, if you think of all your life right up until now as stage one, which is basically R&D, and you've done a lot of trial and error, and you've had things that really worked and didn't. But if you just arbitrarily take everything you've done as just R&D, it was there for the learning, and draw a line and say, now what we want to do is we really want to multiply the best. That's not about just you anymore. That's about you multiplied by a team. So on the other side of the line is the team. And I don't go there because that's not my realm.
Wonderful.
But my intentions go there. My clarity of vision goes to the other side of the line, but I don't go there. Okay.
Right. Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Good. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Dan, thank you so much for your presentation. I wonder if you could offer some insight for a startup with no resources. So, and an entrepreneur who's massively ADD.
Yeah, well, see Tim.
See what?
See Tim.
See Tim, yeah. Exactly. I already sent him an email. Tim.
Everybody has to start somewhere. And first of all, you've had a lot of experience already, in what you've done up until now that is very transferable. So you're not starting at zero. You're probably starting at 50 or 60 in terms of...
Yes, and let me ask the question a little more specifically. So I have lots of ideas,
yeah.
and at Infusionsoft I had 140 people that I could transfer the ideas to.
Yeah.
Now I have no one to transfer the ideas to. And so I'm the one who's executing on the ideas, and I have a strong aversion against taking on capital and cash to build a team. I want to bootstrap the business.
Well, I think, I was sitting here very keenly listening to Tim, and, what he's talking about being an angel investor, he's starting very, very small, and actually he's putting in a lot of sweat equity first to establish his reputation. Mm-hmm. And I think at the beginning of anything, if you don't have capital, then it has to be skill capital and time capital that you have to put in to do it. Yeah. But you should have a set of goals that the first thing I'm going to get is a really good project manager. I mean, I would hire a project manager before a receptionist or a secretary because the technology's there to take care of that, And so that would be my first person I would go. And then once you have that person, and you can talk to Paul because there's a particular profile. We use the Colby system to determine where people go in the company, and there's a particular Colby profile that actually does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're always, you're you hit the beach and then you want to get up to the first,
Exactly.
We're always, and that's why, this is why 95% of the population decides not to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, it's, not many people have the stomach and the stamina for this activity.
And in the meantime, I guess maybe just I use that
Better you could apply for a government grant.
Yeah. No, that's not a bad idea. Okay, thank you.
Robin?
Can you expand a little more on how someone would make a good project manager versus a process manager?
Well, it's a profile in the Colby system.
Is it just the Colby? Is that all you use?
I mean, first of all, they have to have chips. I mean, all the people have, we do the Wonderlic too. And the Wonderlic is the intelligence test, and you have to, they have to be fairly quick-witted about relationships and patterns and everything else. I mean, both Kathy and Paul, I can talk about it. They are very, very fast on the uptake. And the other thing they have to have is pushback, okay? And the only people who can work with me is the ones who push back against me, because I think everything's possible. How many of you in the room thinks that everything's possible? Yeah. Well, it may be ultimately, but not within your deadline. See, there's no unreasonable goals, but there are incredibly unreasonable deadlines. Yeah.
So just the
It's like 10 times. I tell people 10 times. I said, well, what if it was 25 years? It's 4% annual compounded growth per year. Have you ever done 4% growth? He's like, yeah, well, that wouldn't be interesting. Okay, bring it back from 25 years. When does it get interesting?
Okay, so there is a Colby profile for project managers versus process people.
Yeah, and Paul and Shannon will talk to you about that. Yeah, I know they are. Colby does not guarantee success, but not using Colby will guarantee failure.
Okay.
There's character issues.
Do you look at something? Have they done this before in the past, or have you taken someone who's never been a project manager, spotted that talent, and brought
They
them?
will show up. If you do a good referral, and that. There are people who take other people's ideas and run with them, but they don't want to do it a second time. They get bored if you ask them to do the same thing a second. They don't want to be the make it recur person. They just want to make it real person. And these are very sharp psychological, emotional divisions. I don't tamper with them. Anytime I fool around with those, I get into trouble, so I stay away from it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, so is that it?
Yeah. Back here, Dan?
Yes.
So when you say you stay on your side of the line,
Yeah.
you're involved in the ideation phase.
Yeah.
Do you check in after that to make sure things are going okay, or look at the final product, or at any point are you
Well, I
involved?
look at the final product. The question is, am I going?
Where's your milestones? Do you have them?
At this stage with Kathy, and I would say with Paul too, because we've done so many projects together, once they set, we do a discussion, how much do you think I'm going to be needed here? Should I be coming in? Should I be shown any part of the project? And I trust their judgment on this. And they're the ones, I put myself in their hands, okay? You can't play and watch yourself performing at the same time.
Sure.
And so my feeling is that I've gotten better and better at making it up, and they've gotten better and better at making it real, and I just trust it. And then if we have a breakdown, then we correct the system. But I would rather correct a mistake than try to rescue a process. I'd rather have things collapse than rescue people, because people don't learn anything from being rescued. As a matter of fact, they do learn something. They learn exactly the wrong lesson, and they become. So my attitude is, it's all testing. One thing I've learned from the internet marketing people, you're constantly testing. And then, Paul and I have been working together for about 7 years. Kathy and I have been working for 6 years. So, I think there's a fair amount now that we intuitively understand about what the other one needs, and we just put it in place.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't want to think about this stuff. I want to sleep at night.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, ADD is enough of a problem. You don't have to. Yes.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Squirrel.
Where are we? Thanks for the great talk.
Yeah.
Just a question. How do you manage for yourself, or how would you recommend managing entrepreneurs who tend toward that perfectionism side, tend toward the, I think I can do it better than these other guys are doing it side, even though there's like 10 people in the room, not out of arrogance, but just because you can?
Yeah.
That sounds really arrogant, doesn't it? But can you just bear with me for a moment? Pretend it's factually true. You can, and you have to let that go at some point in order to progress. How do you do that? Because sometimes the 80-20 rule, that 20% that's lacking, is really important.
Yeah. Well, I give them 2 words, and everybody can write this down. How many of you will remember if I give you 2 words? It's stop it.
Okay. I knew that.
Yeah, you see, the whole point is if you're an alcoholic, you shouldn't go to bars. You know, I was raised Catholic, and there's a lot of very useful psychological lessons from Catholic education. One's called a near occasion of sin. A near occasion of sin is that if you get into certain situations, the likelihood is you're going to sin. So the moment that an entrepreneur gets into an area, usually of organizational follow-through, they're going to sin. I mean, what I mean is that they're going to demoralize their staff, they're going to increase the complexity and everything else. And I said, well, what's the big picture? See, for me, what I get from simplifying on my side of the line is a huge multiplier on the other side.
Right.
Okay, and that's all I'm after for the rest of my life right now. I just want big multipliers. Okay, I've reached my quota of testing out how bad I am on the other side of the line, and I don't need any more proof, you know? You know?
But sinning is fun. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, do it on your own time. Don't do it. Don't do it on. No, it's. I mean, it's you know, and I don't want to get this across like my image of the switch that you just hit it over. You know, but you have to ask what the big picture is. And I always say, 3 years from now, if we were here, what has to happen for you to feel really, really happy with your progress? And it's not going to be maybe 100% that way, but would 50% make a huge difference? Sure. And that. So I always work. That's why we do it in quarters at Coach, because you can actually make significant progress. You won't make 100% progress, but you'll make significant progress. And if you're doing the 3 wins, that's why I want people to get into the 3 wins habit, is that you're winning all day for 90 days. And winning creates its own momentum. Winning creates its own energy. Yeah, cool. So that's my read on that. But I mean, Tim, we're all in the same boat here, and you and I have had I'm sorry, Tim, John.
Tim and I look so much alike.
John, we're all in the same game here, and a lot of us, really correspond to Ned's description. I just want to tell you one thing. Can I leave off with a story? Can I leave off with a story? So in 1980, I had a friend who was elected to the Parliament of Canada. So I live in Toronto, and I helped him get elected. And one of his first jobs was to do the 1980 UN report, Canadian government's report on the handicapped and the disabled. What was Canada doing for the disabled and the handicapped? And so what I did is I interviewed 40 handicapped people across Canada, and they were all successful. And what you began to realize was that the really successful handicapped individuals are the ones who understand the line between where they're really good at something and where they're handicapped, and they just seek out help once they cross the line. Okay? So I began thinking about that, and I said, well, they're visibly handicapped. People can see they're handicapped, but every entrepreneur I've met is a handicapped person, is a disabled person. And so what I said is, I'm going to treat myself I'm not going to treat myself as if I'm really capable of doing everything. I'm really disabled in certain areas. I get overwhelmed if I get into an area on the other side of the line. I just go into overwhelm. I get really nervous and everything else. I said, well, I can't go there. I can't. If I spent the rest of my life trying to get good over there, I'm not going to be any good. I'll be in the same state 30 or 40 years ago. So I said, you got to treat yourself like a handicapped. And I think if all of you just treated yourself like a disabled and handicapped person, and you say, yeah, but where's the real ability, and just stayed within that framework, and then everything across the line belongs to other people, I think you'd lead a much happier life. But people think, I can do anything. Well, you can't. Yes, Ken.
So I've known Dan. This is a little more of a plug than a question. I've known Dan and Bab since early 90s. I was in their second class
in Vancouver.
In Strategic Coach in Vancouver. And, here's the kind of stuff that you get out of Strategic Coach. So how many people are not in Strategic Coach in this room? Put your hand up. Okay, you all need to be in Strategic Coach. Okay, literally need to be in it. So Dan's 10 times program is about helping you build your teams and the products and the distinctions. You can bring it right out, lay it in front of them, and the magic that occurs. So here's an example of a nugget or a transformation that I got recently. About 4 months ago, I have a guy that comes into my office, and he's a really big dog, a billionaire, and he asked me my pricing on a particular technology we're about to launch, and he says, Ken, I don't mind you getting a little chubby, but I just don't want you getting fat. Okay? In the same week, Dan gives us a quote in the Strategic Coach class, and he says, you get paid a lot more for a transformation than you do for a transaction. So now correlate those two. Right? I wasn't upset over the first comment because I'm never going to get fat. I mean, I'll always get fat, but I'll stay skinny. Anyway, long story short is, I started looking at my whole world. Where am I transformational and where am I transactional? Mm-hmm. And you know that I changed, my whole life has shifted. I only am in relationships. I only make phone calls. I only send emails where I'm transformational. I don't spend time in a transactional world anymore.
Yeah.
So that was an incredible nugget that changed my world. And you get those every time you go and through the weeks and the materials. So I just highly recommend you go register.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, I hope you found that video awesome and useful. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, I want you to click here. And if you want to watch some more videos that'll be useful and awesome, click here. Go ahead. They're over here. Do it now. Come on. Thank you. Watch them.